Welcome to the official YouTube channel for the Colin Cowherd podcast. Go on, hit the subscribe button. There you go, right down there. If you want to be among the first to hear my weekly takes, NFL, college football, more, right there. All right, we are almost ready for the 1 hour Sunday hit from this point forward. We're going to miss one maybe next week, but we're getting them ramped up here in August with John Middlekauff. Before we do that, download the Game Time app. You know the drill. Takes 2 minutes, and you put in the code Colin, COLIN. That will get you $20 off your first purchase. Basically, with the Game Time app, you get tickets faster and less expensive than anybody else out there. Prices on the Game Time app actually go down the closer you get to the first pitch. And baseball is one of those sports, maybe not playoff games, but usually you don't know you're going to a game 2 weeks in advance. A lot of times, big stadium, a lot of games, you make it up that day or that afternoon. Take the guesswork out of buying major league tickets with a Game Time app. Download the app. Code is Colin. $20 off. Terms apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets. Lowest prices guaranteed. John Middlekauff joining me, as he will do probably 20 of the next 24 weeks. I'm going to take a couple of Sundays and be off here. Next Sunday I'm off. Following Sunday I'm going to England with my wife. She's never been there. Got to take her on that last August trip because then I got 6.5 months of no time off. So sometimes, John, the league has changed so much, and we've seen defensive coaches, Belichick, Pete Carroll, really look outdated. The Pittsburgh Steelers, now we have to have this conversation about Mike Tomlin pretty early this year. Russell Wilson had 5 series, 1 first down. They can't get the snap right with Justin Fields. This offensive line, still a mess, doesn't get a great push. Now, we can keep blaming Russell Wilson, but if you go back to last year, let's be fair. Once Hackett left and Payton took over, Russell wasn't the primary issue last year. Limited, yes. The defense was egregiously bad. As I look at Pittsburgh right now, and they have too many good players to be pathetic offensively. And, I mean, Russell Wilson's been in this league a long time. He can't pick up first downs. First downs. When does the Mike Tomlin, I mean, everybody likes him. It's like Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll's got Super Bowls too. Mike's got him. But when I watch that team, I'm like, they just feel like tone deaf offensively.
Yeah, to me, I thought it was time for a divorce last year. You know, Andy Reid and the Philadelphia Eagles got a divorce. How'd that work out for both? Super Bowl for the Eagles. Andy's won 3. Everyone benefited.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like anyone's ever on the hot seat in Pittsburgh. I'm out. I'm out this year. I think this is the year that it finally kind of comes to roost and they don't go over 500. That the offensive line was getting smoked. Russell's a shell of what he used to be. You know, a guy that's lost his confidence. Fields kind of is what he is. I mean, it's carbon copy of what we saw last year. The moment Big Ben started falling off a cliff, and listen, they got lucky's the wrong word because they drafted him and he became a star. And physically at the end, it was ugly, and he was not the same guy. Obviously, threw out his arm. They drafted Kenny Pickett in the first round. That's embarrassing. Like, to me, this isn't embarrassing what they're doing. They got Russell for $1 million and traded nothing for Justin Fields. It's kind of desperate. It's cheap. The Kenny Pickett in the first round. I don't know if you had a chance. I don't blame you if you did not watch any of that Eagles-Patriot preseason game Thursday night.
I watched a little.
He's not very good.
Yeah.
And even if he is a quote-unquote NFL player, he's the type of guy you draft historically in like the 4th, 5th round.
Yeah.
Same building. You always talk about this, Pittsburgh. They feel some loyalty there. It kind of gets weird. He wasn't even remotely close to a first-round talent in the history of the league. Obviously, we got a little quarterback inflation, but they've had a quarterback issue for the last 4 or 5 years. And this year, I think it's going to be worse than last year, even though these guys are more talented, because how polarizing are these two individuals? I mean, Russell's one of the biggest stars the last 15 years. He's become a lightning rod. And Fields has this like cult-like following. And I'm the one saying you should throw him in because at least he can run around. And he did that yesterday. But you can't depend. I mean, how many games last year did they win? Because like TJ Watt got a sack fumble touchdown, or, you know, weird shit happens. They play in a ton of close games. I think this is the year that it just doesn't work. Now, for them, that's not 3 or 4 wins, but 7, 8 wins in Pittsburgh feels like a disaster, does it not?
Yeah, well, Tomlin signed an extension. I'm just saying that if Andy Reid, Bill Belichick, and Pete Carroll can be let go, and I don't think Pittsburgh will, but we've got to be honest about this. There is some. I've been on this for like 4 years. If you go to the best offensive lines in football and the worst, the bottom is overwhelmingly defensive coaches. Now, the Giants is a drafting issue, so Daboll gets a pass there. But there is something about offensive coaches and the ability to remake, reboot, and develop offensive lines. When's the last bad Packer offensive line? They've had offensive coaches. New England right now, atrocious offensive line. See, I think one of the reasons Pete Carroll got axed is they just felt the talent was better than the production. But I watch Pittsburgh right now, and there are things I've always said. Tomlin reminds me a little of Pete Carroll. He's a pro. He's got trophies. He'd get a job, and if Pete was 15 years younger, he'd get another job.
Oh, he would have been hired last cycle.
Yeah. Also, Tomlin is the greatest lock to be a great broadcaster. I think Fox would not hire him to 15 minutes. Fox would hire him.
He'd get a lot of money in the open market as a coach. Yes. Someone would pay him $15 million. The Eagles, if they had he'd be interviewing for the top jobs. But
I do think the culture in Pittsburgh, to me, feels outdated. All their money's on the defensive side. They can't develop an offensive line. They still draft and develop at wide receiver, pass rusher, defensive line, linebacker at a very elite level. Free agency, they're not biggest spenders, but they'll go out and make a deal. I kind of just feel like when I watch Pittsburgh, I'm like, this just feels broken. They don't know
quarterbacks. They don't know quarterbacks.
Well, New England is not only broken, they have a talent scarcity. Pittsburgh's got players. I'll argue that all day long. They've got players.
I mean, they got one of the best players in the league. Minkah Fitzpatrick's a stud. They got a quarterback problem, and they don't know how to identify it. Mason Rudolph, Kenny Pickett. I mean, they were playing games with Duck Hodges 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, he's dating a country star selling real estate now. These two guys, this has got debacle written all over it. And listen, to me, Tomlin, sometimes you just need a fresh start. He's also being let down by, the front office is drafting these players too, and they just had a front office turnover. Kevin Colbert, who is a scout, I would say is pretty good at his job, and they kind of pivoted to kind of this modern day, the cap guy. It's not going to work. Now, one thing they got going for him, Burrow's health is a major concern.
Yeah.
He struggles to practice 4 straight days. I think he has to take the 4th day. The Cleveland Browns, while their roster is excellent and Kevin Stefanski is a good offensive coach, their quarterback situation could be a debacle as well, right? Deshaun Watson has not been good. And the Ravens are they going to be as good as they were last year? You lose Mike McDonald, you lose some players in free agency, but they're still good. But you just factor in the other 2 teams. They have pretty big question marks at quarterback, one being health and one being Deshaun Watson might be the most overpaid player in the history of the league.
Jim Nagy runs the Senior Bowl,
and
I follow him, and he had said multiple times that this is going to be a really great draft. The draft that was just completed in April, especially in the first 5 rounds, gets a little wonky mid-6. That could be a cultural issue. Fewer moms want their sons playing football.
NIL, guys go back.
Absolutely. So listen, we used to have 7 rounds in the NBA draft. When I was growing up, that's what you had. Now you got 2, and you're sort of out of players by the 13th pick. There could be a time we have only 6. We just have 6 rounds in the NFL draft within 10 years. I do think there are fewer kids playing it. If you look at the numbers across the country, there are exceptions. There's your Texases and your Alabamas, but a lot of these states, sometimes the more liberal areas, their moms aren't letting their kids play. Just the reality of it. So one of my takeaways, I'm watching Caleb and Roma Dunze for Chicago. Now, they drafted a punter. They feel kind of like they got a lot of their problems solved in free agency and last year's draft. So they're just adding some pieces. They needed another receiver, a little bit of an edge rusher and a quarterback. But I got to tell you, and it is, this was a good draft. This weekend, I'm watching guys, Kansas City players, and I'm like, these guys are good. These guys aren't even mediocre starters. They're like some guys that are walking into this league and going to be productive. When you were scouting for the Eagles, and it was a different time. In fact, 2 drafts ago was considered a very weak draft. I was told that by Tom Telesco with the Chargers. He's like, this is not a great draft. You better get your guys in your first 3.5 rounds. Middle of the 4th, it gets a little thin. I think I really do. In the NBA, we know this, John. You go from great draft to terrible draft. This year was a weak draft. Previous draft was a good draft. Do you think there'll be a time, because of fewer high school football players, that we will start having good draft, bad draft, good draft? This one felt exceptional. 2 years ago felt weak.
I think the sport has just transitioned so much more to perimeter-oriented game that I think the receivers are going to keep flowing in spades. And I think it's such a sexy position and gets paid so much. Some of the guys that previously might have played defensive back, corner, all want to play wide receiver. I mean, hell, we see it with Travis Hunter. He's top 5 corner, but he loves playing wide receiver because it's a little more fun. God only puts so many guys that can play offensive and defensive line on this planet.
Yeah.
There are only so many body types like that. So it feels like that's been pretty consistent with the body types. I mean, every year. The difference has been the way you play and the way that you develop. I mean, when you were growing up, every team was running the wing T. Hell, when I was a kid, it was kind of transitioning, but the best team in the country, Nebraska in the mid-90s, they ran a veer option offense. And then as Mike Leach was like, what's this guy doing? Now, the majority of the league or in college play a version of that. And I think these NFL coaches have been saying forever, we can only get what they're giving us, right? This is not a minor league system in the sense we have nothing to do with it. So as the offenses change, it really works its way up. So it's harder to find. One thing you have seen, though, is there have been a lot of really good defensive tackle pass rushers, where when I was in the league in 2010, 11, 12, 13, it was hard to find those guys, and there's a lot more, but it's harder to find now good guards and centers coming out of college. So I don't think big picture, at least for the foreseeable future, but I've said forever, like, football is not going to stay on top forever. It has a wide margin in terms of its lead right now, and it feels pretty unflappable, I would say, at least a decade moving forward. But baseball was huge when I was a kid. MJ with the NBA in the 90s, like, things ebb and flow. And to me, you never know. Obviously, the concussion lawsuit, they kind of phased off. I do think what you said, this draft was pretty good. I mean, speaking of guards, like the 49ers found a guy from Kansas who's going to be their starting right guard, Pooney. Yep. So you look at the Rams, they find these, it's like there are guys. You just have to me, it's a lot of guys in a draft have the physical characteristics, size, speed, whatever. It's about your mentality. And I truly believe that's what separates guys. There are certain, like quarterback. I think like Trey Lance or Justin Fields, I do think they're trying. That's a position where it's so fucking hard that if you don't have like the specific, it can just weed you out. It doesn't not lack effort. All the other positions, if you have the physical characteristics, like, you're going to be a pretty good guard or defensive tackle. If you try hard, work hard, take care of your body, right? Yeah. Quarterback's kind of the one individual, a little more skill-based, specific skill, where the others you can make up for with effort and studying and just playing hard, especially the line of scrimmage. So I think when you find the right guys at those positions, which doesn't really feel like it's slowing down, it's just the pressure on the staff, I would say, to coach them up pretty immediately. Like Caleb, listen, everyone, and I'm not going to poo-poo this because he is a really fun player to watch. His comp has been Mahomes. And watching him yesterday morning, I'm like, no, his comp's actually prime Seattle Russell Wilson right now. The scramble ability, that's where he's making his sweetest plays. And there are going to be a lot of negative Nancy's, like he can't play from within the pocket. Well, right now, that's not his strength. But if I'm the McCaskies or I'm the GM, it's like, well, I'm paying the quarterback coach $850K. I'm paying the OC $2.5 million. We just need to work on that. But at 21 years old, what he's bringing to the table, like, is a lot. But for him to be a true star, he's going to, because they're going to be in big games this year. Yeah. And the difference of winning 8-9 games and 11 games are a couple third nines that Fields has no chance to make. This guy does. He just has to, one thing the Seattle and Pete used to push back on is like, let Russ cook. It's like, no, he can't really. Now, I think this guy is better. Well, that's unfair. Russell was really good. Has a chance to be better. But for him to be a superstar, like, clearly he can do this outrageous stuff. We knew that. So I'm not shocked. I'm sure you're not when he makes the play to Rome. Yeah. I understand the excitement. But for them to be like Super Bowl contender in the next 3 or 4 years, got to dominate from within the pocket. But He's 21 years old. It's his second preseason game. Like, what? LeBron wasn't perfect, 2 months into his career. Like, welcome to sports.
Yeah. One of the things I like about football is that we don't romanticize it. That the game changes, the rules change, the kickoff changes. And I absolutely love that about football is that, if you listen to sports talk radio in America, if there's baseball talk, somebody brings up Mantle, somebody brings up, somebody that pitched Koufax. It's just a sport that's rich in history and lore. Yeah. We all collected baseball cards and football's not like that. Football, you move off stuff really quickly. And I think in quarterback, we've always had these rules 3 years full. And we go, what about Eli Manning? And what about Peyton Manning? Peyton in year 4 had a ton of interceptions. But there is something about the current 7-on-7, the high school, college coaching is better offensively. That guys come into this league, quarterbacks. I'm going to give them, I've said this, I'll give you Thanksgiving of year 2. But I kind of know, seriously, by week 2, C.J. Stroud, Kyler Murray, Matt Ryan, like I'm watching and going, well, that works. Team's not good. That works. Like everybody in that New York Giants building knows Daniel Jones can't play. Like I'm watching the other night. Those turnovers are the exact same turnovers 4 years ago. And this is what I think fans don't understand. Dable didn't want him. The GM tried to move up. They are completely trapped by their owner, John Mara's want to make Daniel Jones work. But I'm watching him with 2 picks, bad throws from his end zone, and I'm thinking, I don't need to see anything else. I want the kid to succeed, but it's like Sam Darnold. I love Sam, but he will throw an atrocious pick in every game he's ever played. And I mean, the optics of it are one of those jaw-droppingly, the F was that, Sam.
Yeah.
I've talked about this. Brady threw 200-plus interceptions. Very few are memorably awful in his entire career. Sam gives you one every Sunday, minimum. The Giants situation, are they in the running, do you think, for the number 1 pick? Because Beck's getting picked. The Georgia quarterback's getting picked number 1.
I would think there would be a worse team than them because I do think their defense could be pretty solid. And we've seen Dayball just field competitive teams. I mean, even last year with DeVito, they had some moments. Like, are they more likely to finish 5th than 1? To be 1 overall, I think the Patriots have that written all over them.
Yes.
I mean, written all over them.
I think the Raiders are up there.
I mean, anytime you name Gardner Minshew, your starting quarterback, I have some concerns. I think the Giants got a couple. One, is it crazy? And I understand it was only year 1 for these guys, but if they truly didn't want Daniel Jones or to pay him the contract, for Joe Shane and Brian Daboll to be like, you either fire us or you let us do this? Or is that just like, I understand these jobs are hard to get, but they had just made the playoffs. If he does fire him, he can't. But so they had to be on board a little bit, and even if you watch that Hard Knocks, he keeps going, I want to see what we got. I want to see what we got. We know what you have. You have an Alex Smith who wants to play like he's Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah.
And that's the thing with Darnold. The pick he throws down the sideline, Daniel Jones does. Stingley's going to become the best corner in the league. I know everyone loves Sauce Gardner because of his name, and he's a good player. Stingley's more talented, and to me, would be the guy that every GM in the league picks. If you got to choose between the two of them, that's no shot at Sauce. That's the Stingley guy's got a chance to be very, very special.
Yeah.
You have to miss that deep. But he doesn't have a huge arm. And this is where the team building thing, who do they draft? Well, they draft like this explosive Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson player who doesn't even fit with them with the number 7 overall pick. So you're just, the team building's out of whack. The quarterback position's out of whack. And this is what the Giants have been since they fired Tom Coughlin. And he stormed off that podium, when John Morrow, remember how awkward it was when he gave his goodbye, and listen, it was the right thing to do. But they have been a disaster since. They've run through the Joe Judges, the Pat Shurmurs, David Gettleman. Like they're not going to be any good this year. And I thought, maybe they'll be better in Washington. You watch Daniel Jones. I mean, they can lose to anyone at any moment by any margin because he just can't implode. And Saquon ain't there to save the day anymore.
If you're ever injured, check out Morgan & Morgan. It's America's largest injury law firm, and they are there for you. Over 100 offices nationwide. Think about that. More than 1,000 lawyers with over $20 billion, that's a B, $20 billion recovered for over 500,000 clients. Things happen in life unexpectedly. Submitting an injury claim with Morgan & Morgan is really, really easy. Like winning in the NFL is hard. We know that quarterbacking in the NFL is hard. Submitting a claim is easy. You're ever injured? Check out Morgan & Morgan. Their fee is free unless they win. For more information, go to forthepeople.com/Colin or dial pound law from your cell phone. Morgan & Morgan has a proven track record of fighting for you to get a full and fair compensation if there's an unexpected accident in your life. And I've had a few. I was thinking about this. I had a discussion with a buddy last night, and I said, just forget all the opinions on Aaron Rodgers. He's taken 4 snaps in like 500 days. But I started naming quarterbacks to my friend. And I said, and I want you to consider everything: work ethic, focus, health, mobility, everything. Is Aaron Rodgers, because I'm going to give you a take here, is Aaron Rodgers as good as Mahomes, Allen, or Lamar? He's not.
No.
I don't think he'll be as good this year as Burrow or Herbert with Harbaugh. I don't think he moves as well or as healthy as CJ Stroud. Stafford, and I'll make this argument all day, if Aaron has a clunker this year and Stafford gets to a Super Bowl, you're going to start looking at those two careers differently, because Stafford was a hell of a lot better in high school, college, and the first 4 years in the pros, and he's going to be better late if he crushes the next 2 years. You start going down quarterbacks and say, who's better? Aaron isn't quite as committed. He has a below average offensive coordinator in Nat Hackett. That's been established. The offensive line's in flux, fingers crossed, but it's not elite. He has a defensive coach. Aaron has become, over the course of the last half dozen years, he'll lead the NFL in like throwaways. Like if he doesn't like the play call, Aaron's not taking the arrows. He'll throw it out of bounds. He did that, as you know, with McCarthy the last 2 years. With LaFleur, he may ad-lib out of the play. He wasn't disgusted with it. He was with McCarthy. He will be with Nat Hackett. And so I was just saying to somebody, I said, in the NFC, I viewed him differently. I said, I look in the AFC right now. I don't think he's a top 6 quarterback in the AFC. And my take is it possible that the weakness of the Jets, if Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall stay upright, they're both elite, they're both really special, we may look in week 12 and think, Aaron's not as good as Jordan Love, or now Trevor Lawrence, or Josh, or Lamar, or Burrow, and we say he's like the 11th best quarterback in the league, and the defense is great. Wilson and Breece Hall are crushing. Tyron Smith gives you 12 starts. The rookie from Penn State's better than we think. And we look up, hot take, and go, shit, Aaron's closer to Dak than Mahomes.
Well, 100%. I mean, he's 40 years old. One thing I've noticed on the NFL Network, and it's hard because he doesn't play any of these preseason games, I think he's moving slow.
So do I. So do I.
Every clip I see, it's like he looks like the 45-year-old guy. If you just went to the gym, you see kind of jogging around shooting hoops. That's what he looks like. And that's a little concerning because that's never how he's played. Now, if he just morphs his game into playing like Peyton, or Brady, he has the arm to function like that. Then it gets the question mark, well, he's never had to play like that. If his offensive line, they get a couple injuries, all of a sudden he's kind of moving for his life, but he can't run around. What's the problem with Russell Wilson now? Not quite as fast. Still thinks he can scramble. Well, he can't. It's much easier for Caleb. Why? He's way younger and he's still fast. So you watch these guys kind of scramble around. Some guys can't, some guys can. I just think he's such a polarizing individual. It's going to get weird fast. You got Monday night against the Niners. What if you go in there, you get your teeth kicked in, all of a sudden it's like, oh, here we go again. I don't like I mean, listen, Robert Saleh is a nice guy. He's been completely over his head.
Yep.
Of just being able to handle a star. He always
The
says
podium.
something, and Aaron's like, "What the hell what's he talking about?" And
Right.
that's stuff that like Mike McCarthy doesn't do. Just knows how to handle. Yeah, I mean, I just think that if his mobility is gone, and not gone where he can't move at all, like Tom Brady at 45, but he used to be, 7.5, 8 out of 10, and now it's more like 5-ish, and he's less hesitant to do it once he realizes I'm not as quick. That changes the player dramatically.
Yes.
And you're looking at, like you said, the influx of new young quarterbacks. Uh, you know, let's use Brock Purdy as an example. One thing he can do is scramble around.
Yeah, he moves well.
And that is the modern day football. You have to be able to move, because we talked about the talent coming in the league. Well, there hasn't been a lot of Trent Williams come in the league and Larry Allen's over the last 5-10 years, but there has been a lot of defensive lines. So you're at a disadvantage most games where they got more good defensive linemen than you do offensive linemen. That's why these quarterbacks being able to scramble around can save you. Well, if that's gone for him, with the lack of offensive ingenuity that's in that building from a coaching standpoint, you could argue they could be screwed relative to the expectation that he's back and going to save the day.
Also, I remember as a kid, I got into a motorcycle accident, ripped up. I still have a scar from it.
What kind of bike were you riding?
Huh?
Like a dirt bike or like a Harley?
Honda 150 or something.
Okay,
but it was pretty ugly. And I can remember it took me 2 years before somebody finally said, "Dude, you got to get on that." A neighborhood dad said, "You got to get on that bike, kid. You just got to you got to crash again." And that always sticks in my head that if you get hurt doing something, you got to get back in there. Brady acknowledges the first year back from his injury, he didn't want anybody near his knees. He got prickly. He would bark at officials. Are we not acknowledging Aaron is going to be affected by that? Like, Aaron probably deep down feels like he disappointed the city taking 4 snaps, though it wasn't his fault. So you've got an aging player, a player that is going to be hypersensitive to that, an offensive coordinator you can't trust. I think we look at the Jets and think Aaron will save us. And my take is, no, actually, I trust their defense. I think Garrett Wilson is really good. Breece Hall. I think the O-line will kind of figure it out. I'm just saying, I think we're going to look up at Thanksgiving and like, Aaron sometimes is a weakness.
I haven't had a chance to read the book or listen to the audio book yet. Obviously, there's a lot coming out about that family moment at the Tahoe golf tournament where he saw his dad. And obviously, there's 2 sides to every story. Who knows? Maybe if the parents are whack jobs and it's not as much on Aaron, which it kind of feels like that might be, is not as crazy as on Aaron's side. But regardless, isn't it a pretty consistent theme over the last however many years? The quarterback and the family relationship. You look at Peyton and Tom, obviously their families are very, very close. Caleb's tight with his, Russell and his family. You just go around the league, Patrick Mahomes and his family. Lamar's mom's his agent.
Yeah.
I mean, it's that strain. Like I saw some craziness when I was a kid with some, extended family. That's hard on any human. I don't care who it is. It wears on you. Even if you're right or they're right, it doesn't even matter after a while. It's just that lack of, you only have so many people in your life that when you grow up, and that relationship with your brothers and sisters and your parents, you remove that. I can't even imagine. I can't relate to that because the relationship I had with my dad's passed now, but my dad, my mom, my brother, that seems like hard to overcome in certain moments of just to gain some levity in life, or just to gain like, hey, I need to talk to somebody. Not even about something serious. That's an underrated part. And I think a lot of people sarcastically mock and stuff. I'm talking about as a human being, and I wonder if that situation, I mean, he sees his dad at that tournament and goes up to him. I mean, what a fucking awkward thing they got going on.
The Aaron thing was a mild take, because I do think most people realize these young quarterbacks are sensational. They move better than Aaron, better health. Many have offensive coaches. If I had a take, and I know, I've used this example before, John, and you as a scout probably know this better than anybody. I have talked about before, Seahawk camp was in Cheney, Washington, where I went to college. And I've talked about before seeing Eugene Robinson from Colgate, his first practice with the Seahawks, and literally knowing, I had people around me and I could name them. I went to college with them saying, holy shit, he is lighting up Steve Largent. Who is that? Colgate. Who at that time, I don't even know if I'd ever seen an Ivy League game on TV. This is back in like 1982. It doesn't take long to see certain things, right? Here's a take. Bo Nix is got a better arm than I think people think. I think he's more cut and athletic than people think. I noticed this when I saw him live on the field against Utah. That game, everything went Oregon's way. And I know it's preseason, John, but I've watched Bo Nix and I'm like, oh shit. Caleb, defensive coach. Drake May, defensive coach. Jaden, defensive coach. JJ McCarthy hurt. Penix may not play. Hot take. Bo Nix is the best quarterback this year out of the crop.
I think Caleb will be better because of what he's dealing with, but I think Bo Nix is going to shut a lot of people up really fast. I mean, it's already inevitable. He's a starter for week 1. He's got a coach, I would say, a well-established, very rich guy who's already won a Super Bowl, who kind of has this like back against the wall chip on his shoulder right now.
Yeah.
Because that year last year was probably not fun. And is anything, I would say nothing has a chance to age better faster than booting Russell out for $80 million and selecting this guy. And let's face it, leading up to the draft before he inevitably picked him, everyone was going, oh, Sean Payton wants Bo Nix. That's terrible. That's awful. You can't draft this guy that high. This is crazy. This is stupid. And it's like, no, I mean, this guy has a pretty good idea. He was one of the rare guys that was all in on Mahomes. He like Drew Brees once upon a time when not everyone was lining at the door. So I would say that you have an offensive coach is just a huge advantage, and a guy that can develop quarterbacks and a guy who can call the plays. To me, my biggest thing is not offensive and defensive coaches. It's, do you call the plays? Do you dictate 50% of the game? And obviously, as an offensive coach, not only are you calling the plays, you're controlling the quarterback then essentially and the pace of the game. Defense is much more physicality. There's stuff out of your control. Even great defense gets beat sometime. But as an offensive play caller, you can completely control the game. And beside that couple-year stretch, which was bad, when I think Rob Ryan was their defensive coordinator in New Orleans, and they were going 7-9, even though their offense was setting records. When they've had good defenses, they dominated. They were consistent 10 to 12 win team in the NFL. That's what Sean Payton's record is when the defense is solid. So if their defense is solid, which it was the second half of last year, and clearly, I think removing Russell Wilson, and this is why I'm out on the Steelers, that thing that you take in is more than just that missed third down throw. It's all this other stuff, which in fairness, I don't know how much Russell brings it. It's just there now. It's just part of the deal.
Yeah.
And you remove that, you get this young, hungry guy, you get this chip on the shoulder coach. The Raiders naming Gardner Minshew that they're not going to be any good. The Chargers just going to have some injury problems, and their depth is going to be very questionable.
Yeah.
Is it crazy to think Denver could finish second in this division?
No.
He clearly likes this team. They like their rookie class. They got some good wide receivers watching them play. I mean, I don't think it's inconceivable they go 9-8.
Bo Nix played with Troy Franklin. Troy averaged 105 yards per game, 14 touchdowns. Shit, they played together in college. Like, think about this. He's 24. Drake May's 21. Offensive coach. I think between Mims, Cortland Sutton, and Troy Franklin, they have a good tight end, 2 capable backs. I'm like, that's at least average to slightly above average. I mean, look at Dallas Cowboys. They're completely dependent on CeeDee Lamb staying healthy or they're screwed. Yeah. So to me, I look at Denver and I'm like, every single year, it was Houston last year, there's a pop team. And I'm watching Bo Nix, and I've had a couple of texts with Sean Payton. It's not lost on me that a former NFL quarterback that I was talking to in the building at Fox several months ago said, just remember, Drake, Caleb, and Jaden have defensive coaches. He goes, I don't care how talented they are. And this guy came into the league years ago and had a defensive coach. He said, it matters. Like, you're nervous. He said a defensive coach. I mean, Mark Sanchez told me years and years ago, it's like, the reality is an offensive coach, you talk at night, you text, you're texting. Defensive coaches think differently. Their buddies are defensive coaches. Their favorite players, or Belichick's favorite player is Lawrence Taylor. It's not Tom Brady. Yeah. So I think, I just think Denver's better. PFF has their personnel near the bottom of the league, and I'm like, I
Well,
don't think.
why'd Peyton Manning love Adam Gase? Because he could text him at 1 o'clock in the morning and he'd text him right back and they'd be talking football. These offensive guys, I saw with Andy Reid, sleeps like 3 hours a night. He's just in the whiteboard, just doing these guys. It's like a creative. The mentality it's night and day different. Now, some of the defensive guys are just such natural leaders. The aggressiveness it's a different personality. But yeah, I mean, I think the offensive play caller is number one guy you'd ever want running, especially in this modern day football. But who are the options for pop teams? Right, it'd have to be a team, a non an AFC West team, right? Not the Chiefs. So it'd be the Raiders, the Chargers, or the Broncos. I think most people are out on the Raiders when you watch their quarterback situation. I'm a Jim Harbaugh diehard, but they just got a ton of injuries. They got guys that have always injured. That makes me nervous. Their quarterback just got out of a boot. The Jets, who we talked about, I would say are pretty are walking a very, very tight line. They could shatter in front of our eyes immediately. The Steelers, I got coming back to earth. They were already a playoff team. Same with the Cleveland Browns, because their quarterback situation just scares the crap out of me. I think it's wide open for a team like the Broncos to kind of sneak up on people for sure.
So as we go into the season, I thought about this. If the Chiefs three-peat, Belichick didn't do it. And we talk a lot about the Chiefs. We talk about Mahomes and Brady, right? Brady's going to be more productive, but Mahomes is more talented and increasing in production. But I want to talk about Andy Reid and Belichick. Andy Reid wins a third straight Super Bowl. Belichick never did it. Andy Reid, 2 teams to a Super Bowl. Belichick didn't do it. Andy Reid had to face, for the first 15 to 20 years of his coaching career, a league that allowed Belichick's favorite rules to exist. Yet Andy still flourished. 5 NFC championships. The minute the league pivoted to offense and Brady left, Belichick it's Jurassic. He is completely tone deaf. And my take is, we've always felt there's Belichick and Shula. Andy wins a third straight. Andy's Super Bowl, Philadelphia, Kansas City. Andy's won with terrible quarterbacks. Andy's won with everybody. Andy's assistants are better. Andy's the one coach that gave Belichick real problems. Go look at their record. I think that Andy Reid-Belichick gap gets really thin. Really thin. And if we're going to be fair, the league pivoted to offense 7 years ago, about 7, 8. You're like, everything now. It's go look at Belichick's last 7 drafts, last 4 seasons. I'm not confusing it. I think Belichick is a better coach than Shula, and Shula has more wins. It's not all just on record. Andy Reid is good with everybody at quarterback. I think the gap closes. I think it gets really close if he knocks down 3 straight Super Bowls.
Well, I'd say it's been closing dramatically fast over the last 2 years as he's knocked these last 2 off, right? I'm torn on this because I'm an Andy Reid guy, but I am a Belichick defender of, like, we know what we watched. We watched him outcoach everyone for 18 years.
Yeah.
And that includes Andy, beat him in a Super Bowl. Now, he had Brady, he had McNabb. The gap there is pretty wide. And he did beat him Mahomes' first year on the road in that AFC Championship game that went to overtime. That was one of the better games the Patriots ever played in. But you could argue, if Andy wins one more, the ability to coach every type quarterback,
absolutely,
and like you said, and win pretty big. I mean, he was consistently going to the playoffs with Alex Smith, no problem, right? Winning with Donovan McNabb, who had some serious flaws. Belichick could not only coach or have success with one guy. That guy was wired like a defensive guy. You could just dog cuss him. You could scream at him. That's not really the way most quarterbacks handle. And you put anyone else in that place, it gets a little weird really fast. Where I think Andy's personality is much more tailored to quarterbacks.
Yeah.
Which have always been the name of the game, right? So Bill just got pretty lucky. He just got this rare bird that was wired more like Mike Vrabel or Teddy Bruschi. He could just take it. Most quarterbacks were not taking that type of abuse. So why every article that was ever written about any backup quarterback that sat next to Tom said, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. The way that he takes this, it's like it terrified everyone else because Mahomes ain't, again, it doesn't mean you can't coach a guy hard or push a guy, but they treated everyone as equals when they're not equals. Joe Montana, John Elway, Peyton Manning, they weren't equals in the room, and the room knows it. But Belichick's thing, to me, could have only worked with Tom. It's why they were the perfect marriage. One of the great sports marriages of all time.
Yeah.
Andy can date anybody. If you gave Andy any of the top, let's just say 15 quarterbacks in the NFL, I'm not saying the Chiefs win the Super Bowl. If you gave him like Josh Allen, they'd win the Super Bowl, or Joe Burrow. Lamar would be fun. I think he could just take like Dak, random guys, and they would have 11, 12 wins. Now, they may lose in a playoff game because that guy's not good enough, but he would be a lock for the playoffs. And I don't think you could say that about Bill as the years went on, rotating. Just give him Dak Prescott. He's a lock to win. I don't feel that way. So that's Andy's trump card in this modern day football. It ain't even close, right? His ability to do offense and quarterback, Bill couldn't. That's why I think a lot of people were off Bill. Now, it'll be very fascinating to watch how this offseason or this season goes with Bill playing this new role. I would say Bill is very dependent on one individual over the last 15 years, and that was Josh McDaniels. When he had Josh, and Josh's available. So if you're getting a package deal, and once you hire Bill and Josh, well, no one's ever hiring Josh to be a head coach ever again, right? In the NFL, maybe in college. But so maybe Bill has that going for him. But I don't even think it's remotely close. And I think Mahomes is a good example of like the guy that we see now is so much different than the guy we saw early on. The way they've coached him, the way he's changed. And just, if you can't coach the quarterbacks, I mean, Andy put Juan Castillo as defensive coordinator when I was there. Everyone makes mistakes. Yeah. But to put Matt Patricia as your offensive coordinator, a second-year coach, is one of the most insane things ever. And for as great as Belichick's resume is, that's like an all-time stain. To me, that's a bigger stain than like Deflategate or any of that other crap.
I mean, there are these moments. Every great actor, Brando had 6 bombs.
De Niro, they all do.
Right. But there are moves over the last 3 to 4 years with Belichick that I can't unsee. And the Matt Patricia thing and the 5, 6 straight, there are drafts where they don't have a single good player. It stains how I look at Bill. And how the beginning and any great movie starts great and finishes strong. Bill's ending is a catastrophe.
Think about this too. I do think it's a little weird that this, Bill was like this ultimate dictator. And don't get it wrong, like you're in the building with Andy, like he's the boss, but he interacts clearly a little different. Because look at his resume of like Doug Peterson was a right-hand guy, won a Super Bowl. Matt Nagy, they claim, was a disaster, took the Bears to the playoffs. Ron Rivera took the Panthers to the Super Bowl. Andy guy. John Harbaugh turned out to be pretty good. Like, why do Andy's guys just function pretty well? And Bill's guys, football coaching's hard. And every guy's going to lose, have a bad season, you're going to get fired eventually. His guys get run out of the building in record speed.
Yeah.
Joe Judge immediately, you're like, oh, this ain't working. Josh McDaniels couldn't even make it through the second year. After like 10 years to take a step back. Patricia, whatever the hell happened in Detroit, an all-time.
Couldn't get along with Stafford.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So, and these are his core guys. Like, when you think Bill of the last 15 years, Brian Flores couldn't get along with a soul on offense. Hate his interactions with the quarterback because that's what they saw. Think about that. That's what those guys saw. All defensive guys scream at the quarterback. You're like, this ain't going to work. That ain't Tom Brady.
Success or failure, all of Andy Reid's guys are guys you'd love to have a beer with. They're good dudes.
Well liked.
Go to Bills, Charlie Weiss, Joe Judge.
He was just ranting on Twitter about getting fired from SiriusXM. I was like, Charlie, what's going on here?
Almost all of Bill's guys, Eric Mangini's an exception. Almost all of them. They're a lot of work. Like, if they were in the building, you'd avoid them. They're harsh. They're intense. They're arrogant. Yeah. Bill is attracted to that quality, that sort of pseudo-confidence, arrogance. And these guys, Matt Nagy used to call me, hey, thanks for saying nice stuff. My kids listened this morning going to work. Like Doug Peterson's a great guy. They're all nice guys. And Andy is looking for people that Andy barks. So I think he looks for people psychologically that can comfort players when he barks. Bill barks and doubles down on the barking. And that's why the minute Brady leaves, free agents don't want to go there. Brandon Ayuk's like not remotely interested in that culture that Bill created.
Yeah, to me, his culture was all dependent on Tom once Tom established himself. And if go back to Wolf, like they could have pivoted way earlier to Young and been fine. Like it wasn't dependent on one individual. I just think that's an all-time outlier situation, what we saw, because the way the quarterback could take it, none of these other quarterbacks take it. It's why every single guy to a man, the backup quarterbacks that all rotate around the league were like, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. And it's not like obviously there are a small percentage of teams that just are really buttoned up, do it the right way. The Ravens, the Chiefs, the Patriots, like the gap of how they get ready, isn't it? But the way that they treated the quarterback in front of the entire team didn't happen anywhere else because that's not normal, and you're never going to see that. And I understand why the Patriot guys defend it. Like if I was Edelman, I would defend it too because they won a lot, but it wasn't sustainable once you remove the key cog. It crumbled down, and I'm telling you, it's going to get really ugly there. It's going to get really ugly there. That team rolling out Jacoby. I mean, Drake's a major project. People are going to be mad at Kraft because everything he did to Bill, even obviously didn't end well with Bill on the field, but you respect a guy that brought you so much. I think it's going to be really bad. And you talk to, like, I text around people in the league. They're like, buckle up, fellas. it's going to be ugly. And it's not like they're playing in a division. I mean, the Bills got a lot of moving parts. Obviously, they are the king of the division. The Dolphins aren't great. The Jets could implode. If you told me they didn't win a divisional game, I'd believe you.
So Chris Peterson's gone. Nick Saban's gone. Jim Harbaugh's gone. Dabo Swinney is struggling with the transfer portal and NIL. Ryan Day is struggling defining what Ohio State is. Take Kirby Smart out. He's considered the best coach in college football. I think Kalen DeBoer's really close. And the rest of the country will see that, what Husky fans know. It's really interesting. And this is why you can't give up on people. I could make an argument. The third best coach in college football is Lane Kiffin. And this sport bailed on him. Ole Miss has no business being as good as they are. I mean, let's be honest. The state produces, I mean, how many players? They can't get. Oh, and Georgia gets the best in Georgia. Bama gets the best in Bama. Florida, it's rated by everybody. That state's only got 3.5 million people. It's Oregon. It's got more players than Oregon. But generally speaking, most of these teams in the top 10 come from highly populated states, fertile recruiting grounds. Is that people bailed? The Raiders bailed on him. College football bailed on him. And you start looking around and I'm like, and by the way, Sark's somewhere in the top 10. He may not have the trophy yet, but recruiting, culture building, quarterback development, Sark knows what he's doing. He's won a lot of games. Washington was 0-12 when he took it over. They were 7 wins second year, and he handed Chris Peterson some dudes, some NFL bodies. But I was thinking about that today. Take Kirby out and Kalen DeBoer, we know it. Urban's gone, Harbaugh's gone, Saban's gone, Chris Peterson's gone, all these guys. Dabo is struggling with NIL and the transfer portal. He's struggling with it.
He won't do it. He won't do it.
He won't do it. And Ryan Day hired Chip Kelly, which I think is brilliant because the hole in his game, which he acknowledges, is the run game. Ryan admits that. So you can't put him as a top 5 coach now because he's beating Purdue. Lane Kiffin can coach his ass off. That's my take.
One of the best stats I remember hearing last year was Ole Miss has never had back-to-back double-digit win seasons in the history of the program. Lane did it. 22 and 23. And last year when he beat LSU, you're watching him going, the talent gap on these two rosters can't be as close as what it looks like on the field. Obviously, he scares people, but to me, he's got one of the blue bloods, whether it's Florida, if they make a change, whoever. There were rumors that I had heard Oregon, when Dan Lanning got it, he was really interested. People just wouldn't touch him. You get to a point, though, I think, especially in college sports in the NFL, you win enough, who cares? Like, what are we even talking about? And a lot of people think they're going to be a top 10 team. He crushed the transfer portal. He's got
Oh
a
yeah.
good quarterback.
Oh yeah.
I do think there's a lot of pressure, though. It's one of those where even if he wins 8 or 9 games and misses the playoffs, it's still a remarkable accomplishment. You win 10, 11, and then 9. You're at Ole Miss, not Ohio State.
Right.
Like, I'm with you on Kalen DeBoer. He's a star. And
Yeah.
don't be shocked when they're back in the Final Four with Alabama right away.
I think they will be.
Right? But you should win at Alabama. Even if some guys leave, you're still inheriting every single guy on that roster is someone that Nick had recruited, right? You should win at Ohio State. You obviously should win at USC. Even Sark. It is, to me, much more impressive. They have an unlimited checkbook to sign whoever they want, whenever they want. Now, Sark had a good year last year, though kind of a little soft in the playoff game against Washington. It's way easier to win at Texas than it is at Ole Miss. Like, Lane went to, what, FAI or FUI or whatever that school was in Florida that no one could even get right if I polled random people that follow sports. And then to Ole Miss, who usually runs through coaches every 3 or 4 years.
Yeah.
And now he's kicking everyone's ass. He's beating LSU. Yeah, I mean, I just think that it's easy to hire. I think part of what's worked against Lane, it's easy for USC to give $100 million to Lincoln. Like, everyone's on board. It's easy when LSU gives 90 plus to Brian Kelly. Like, we see, I think it is controversial in some of these ADs and whatever to hire Lane. At this point in time, you're crazy if you do not. They're hiring these Billy Napiers and all these other guys. Lane's running circles around them all. So, I mean, what he's doing at Ole Miss. Now, here's the thing. He's getting paid $9-10 million there, and they clearly got a pretty good. Does he need to leave?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it's lifestyle. He likes the South. He's told me that. He likes the South. He loves fishing. He's an intense guy. He likes it's you get some space. People are nice. Lane's a little cocky, unique personality, but I also think he's got a great heart. And I think he's really a good coach. I think sometimes when dad's a coach or dad's a broadcaster or dad's a bank president, the son gets placed into a position he's not quite ready for. And if it wasn't for Monty Kiffin, Lane probably doesn't get the Raider job. We don't know. He's just another young assistant. McVay, his, like grandpa or somebody was a general manager. That's different. It wasn't high profile. But I think one of the vagaries of having a famous, successful dad, and if you go into the same industry, is you tend to get inserted into places that eventually you are ahead of people and you will be successful. But Lane was like kid coach, like 32 years old. And I can remember when he went to USC, he just wasn't, and I was rooting for him, but he was a little loose with his private personal life. He just didn't quite know how to be a head coach at USC. It wasn't the play calling. But I think there is an advantage when dad or grandpa or somebody ran the bank and you get into finance. There's an advantage. But I look around college football now, and in a big game, I'm going to tell you this. I would not want to face Lane Kiffin. I think he's clever. And by the way, playing with house money at Ole Miss, he has the talent of most of the top 6, but none of the pressure that an Ohio State does if they met in the playoff.
I think one thing that is dramatically different about him is at USC, he almost had like this angry, edgy, anti-media, being fun, and he's the complete opposite now. He's just much more looser, especially in front of a camera. He feels much more natural. Maybe he just embraced it. Listen, Jimmy Sexton and Nick Saban changed his life. I mean, he says it as much, right, when he goes to Nick. And I wonder if he saw Nick, like, you can be this hard-driving kind of a-hole coach on the field and kind of handle when the lights are on with the media, because you're in that business. As an NFL coach, your roster is your roster. You're not recruiting anyone out there. In college football, it's a little different. It's why Nick, when the camera's on, kind of turns into a different guy. Yeah. He has all these different kind of like characters he can play.
Yeah.
Where I think Lane struggled with it. Now you watch him. I saw this clip on the internet the other day about he was on with the SEC Network guys, and they were asking about his dad. And he's like, you just got this emotional side of Lane. You have to remember, Lane was a quarterback at Fresno State in the late 90s who, when Pat Hill recruited Billy Volek and David Carr, they said, Lane, you're never going to play here. Immediately just transitioned into being a coach with Jeff Tedford, who was the offensive coordinator. This guy transitioned at like 20 years old to being a coach. And like you said, to me, it is an advantage if you do like you're mentally, or I would say mature enough to handle it. Like Kyle Shanahan, this guy went right into it. And to me, Kyle's much more serious in the sense of you're not screwing around as much. Lane has some, interests, I would say, outside the football building. I wonder if he just has corralled it all and got the right people around him. But his personality in front of the quote unquote media or when he's doing things with a camera on, to me, is dramatically different than the guy that we saw at USC, which I thought was part of his undoing. He wasn't that likable. Isn't that a huge part of life? Like, if you're kind of likable, people root for you. Like the Sam Pittman guy at Arkansas. I think he's not very good, but everyone loves the guy.
Yeah. He's like everybody's really friendly stepdad. Be hard to fire. It's like the Freakonomics talked about that. I think it was Freakonomics was the book. They talked about that the doctors that get sued aren't the bad doctors. The doctors that get sued are often the most educated and the most successful doctors. They don't have good bedside manner. It's impossible to sue even the incompetent doctor you love.
Yeah.
Right? It's hard to fire somebody you really have great affection for. It's easy to sue the asshole surgeon that screwed up during the surgery, right? Like, so I think as you become more likable, and let's be honest about this. My dad used to say this: your employment will be based in rooms that you're not in. People will raise their hand. A boss will say, raise your hand. Colin stays or goes. There's 9. You need 5.
Get rid of Middlekauff. The room goes silent.
Hey, me and Logan have those meetings almost every other week.
I know.
But there's a lot to be said with Lane, is that when you're a little snarky and you go on a 3-game losing streak, or it's just much easier to get rid of guys that are a pain.
Well, I'll give you a guy, because in the NFL, that only goes so far. If you're winning 6-7 games, no matter how much they like you, they run you out of town. Arthur Smith, I remember when they fired or Arthur Smith was fired by Arthur Blank, and Arthur Blank's like, I love the guy, I didn't want to do it, but he just wasn't good enough. I was flipping around channels and watching Big Ten Network. They had on Matt Rule. I'm like, I see why this guy's a good college coach. He's just kind of got a personality.
Yeah.
Can own the room when the camera's on. And you're like, I get it. And I've heard he's not easy to play for. It can be really difficult.
Yeah.
And they're the classic team of like, they bring in this young hotshot quarterback, and the expectations are high, and it's usually hard to live up to those. All of a sudden you win 7-8 games. People are maybe like, can we sneak into the playoffs? Week 2 is Nebraska hosting Colorado. I mean, I don't know if you saw the clip. I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago. Even Dion was like, hey, CBS, whoever hears from CBS, I'm sorry, we're all good now. I would imagine someone at Colorado like, we can't be doing all this. Like, we got to be a little careful. Pick your battles, Dion. You're not the player. And that's where I think Dion kind of carries himself. Like, you're the coach, but you got all these other guys. And beside your couple sons and Travis Hunter, some of these guys aren't going to be able to back up all your words. Right. We don't have Alabama. We've got to be careful. That game, because last year, remember, Nebraska's quarterback looked like me. I mean, it was a joke.
It was awful.
It's going to be a little more interesting this time around. That's one of those. There's a lot of USC, LSU, and all these. That's a game that I have this season circled. Like, will not be moving off the couch for that one.
John Middlekauff, former NFL scout, 3 and out. As always, buddy, great stuff.
See you, Colin.